I think we can begin now. I'm Jerry Garfinkel, and I want to welcome everybody to the Jewish Study Center. I'm treasurer of the Jewish Study Center, and as such, I tell people that our classes are free. Most of our instructors, like Rabbi Asch, do it, volunteer, but we do have expenses. For example, for the Zoom and also our website, that's various expenses. So we encourage people to donate, though it's no requirement. If you want to donate, go to our website, www.jewishstudycenter.org, click on donate, and then you can donate from your PayPal account with a credit card or with a check. If you click on check, it'll give you an address to send things, where to send your check. Okay, some technical points now. This session is being recorded, as you probably noticed. After the session is over, I will delete the part that comes before I began the session, and I'll post the recording on YouTube. I'll send an email to everybody who's registered to tell them where the recording is. The email may have some other information also. And another point is that we want your comments and your questions, but you are muted. So we want you to put your comments and questions in the chat and address them to everybody. Because sometimes you put a comment in, someone will comment on your comment, etc., etc. I think that's about it. Okay, so I will introduce Mindy Reiser, who is our vice president, and she will both introduce today's speaker, Rabbi Erica Asch, and she will also take care of the Q&A after the session's over. So Mindy, you can take it over. You are currently okay. You're okay now.
Okay, well, welcome everyone. We're so glad you could spend this time with us. And I am delighted to introduce our speaker, and I can't think of someone who could give us a more illuminating overview of small town Jewish life. Her name is Rabbi Erica Asch, and she is the spiritual leader of Temple Beth in Augusta, Maine. She received her rabbinic ordination from Hebrew Union College, Jewish Institute of Religion, in 2008. And then she took a position as a community organizer with the Industrial Area Foundation. After 3 years with the Industrial Areas Foundation, she served at Temple Sinai in Washington, D.C. And she did this before moving to Augusta in June 2013, where she began her service as the rabbi of Temple Beth. She was installed as president of the Central Conference of American Rabbis in February 2023, and that took place in Tel Aviv. She is the senior program associate at the Center for Small Town Jewish Life. And now we will turn to the rabbi who will tell us about the work of the center and give us insight into the way small towns and Jewish life are emerging and evolving in 2024.
Thank you so much, Mindy. And it's great to be here with all of you. Thank you for taking time out of your evenings to speak with me. And hello to Barbara and Peter. It's so great to have you both on as well. So I want to just share a plan. I'm not going to share slides for the entire thing, but I want to spend a little bit of time talking about who I am as a community organizer. It's important to me that you all know a little bit about my story. I want to talk about the landscape of Maine and beyond, what it looks like here for small communities and in general for small communities. I want to talk a little bit about the work of the Center for Small Town Jewish Life and how we support Jewish life here in Maine and how we're increasingly working with communities beyond Maine. And then we'll have a little bit of time for questions. So I hope that that sounds okay for everyone. Good. Give me a nod if that sounds good.
Okay.
Yes, that's like what you signed up for. Okay, excellent. So, I grew up in a suburb of San Diego, and I grew up in Coronado. If anyone knows San Diego, it's right over the bridge, across the bay. And I was one of very few Jewish kids in my town. It was myself, my brother, and Henry Goldberg. We were the three Jews that went to Coronado High School. Um, and and so it was not a small town by any sense of the imagination, but I really had a sense of what it was like in my growing up to be one of the few Jewish children around. And I want to skip forward in my story a little bit. After college, I did Teach for America, and I went to Greenville, Mississippi. I went to Indianola, Mississippi, but the nearest synagogue was in Greenville. And so when I got down to the Delta, I decided I wanted to go to synagogue, and I called up the local synagogue in Greenville and said, "Can I come to Friday night services?" And they said, "Sure." And I drove over and I went in for a Friday night service. And I'm just checking, did anybody here grow up in a classically reform congregation? Any class. And if you don't have your video on and want to turn it on, that would be amazing for me. You don't have to, but it would be great. Um, so this was a classical reform congregation. I walked in, I came from a very hippie college where we danced and sang and drummed a little bit. And I walked into this synagogue, which is a gorgeous synagogue with a whole bunch of steps up to the bima and stained glass windows. And they were using the Union prayer book, not the New Union prayer book, but the Union prayer book, which they had stopped using about, I don't know, 40 years earlier in the movement. "O Lord, mayest thou lookest down upon us in thine favor," which I really appreciate now, I have to say. And everyone there was over 50, which was very old to me as a recent college grad. And most people were over 70. And I thought to myself, this is never going to work. And Jay did. And after services, I went to the Oneg, and people were so thrilled to see me. It was really wonderful to meet them. They wanted to know who I was and what I was doing there. And they started calling people up who weren't at synagogue that night. "Richard, come down, meet. There's a new Jewish person in town." And they really became my family while I was down there. And that was a small community that really taught me that I wanted to serve the Jewish community and helped me decide that I wanted to be a rabbi. So that is a little bit about, and then I went to rabbinical school, and you know the rest of the story, as they say. So I want to share a few things, and it's not surprising that I ended up in a small town. So I want to share a few things about the about me. So right, so what some of the things I love about being in Maine is that we are very place-based. So I got to dress up as a lobster for Purim because that is a thing that happens in Maine. We have a small but mighty religious school, and we get to be intergenerational in a lot of our programming and really take advantage of the outdoors and being outdoors, which I really appreciate. So I want to talk a little bit about Jewish life in Central Maine. This is a picture of our teen cooking program with the Center for Small Town Jewish Life. These are teens from around the state that come together 5 or 6 times a year, and we also take them on a trip so that they can really get to know other teens and build that community. We have people here from Liberty, Maine, from Auburn, Maine, from the coast, kids who live an hour and a half away from each other, coming together to hang out with one another. And the Maine Jewish community is really built up of some people who are from here and who grew up here, who have family roots here, and a lot of people who moved here out of choice because they wanted a slower pace of life, because they wanted a chance to experience the outdoors, and they appreciated that. And as many of you from small communities know, there's something that happens in smaller towns where you really have to dig in and help to build the community that you are creating together. Just a few more things that I want to share about Maine in general and the Jewish community. It's a really economically diverse Jewish community. There's a lot of poverty. There's not a lot of extreme wealth within the Maine Jewish community. We have a lot of people who are intermarried. We are a diverse community politically and culturally, and a multiracial community, which might be surprising to some people, but that is a piece of the diversity that we have within our community, and really a do-it-yourself community. And when I think about Central Maine and the area I live in, we have a lot of students who are on free and reduced lunch. Like I said, it's an area that has a lot of poverty in it. We have a lower percentage of adults with bachelor's degrees than you might find in your typical big city Jewish community. And a lot of the Jewish philanthropy that we have here is really focused on poverty relief. So I want to share, so that's a little slice into Maine and the Maine Jewish community. I want to share a little bit about small town Judaism, because I think this is something that we don't think about a lot. Over 1 million Jews, that's 1 in 8 Jews in the United States, live in a county with a population of fewer than 10,000 Jews. And you'll see the map there. So that might be surprising to many people. We have huge concentrations of the Jewish communities in a number of very small places. You can see on the map where they are, right? South Florida, the East Coast, a few major metropolitan areas in the Midwest, and over in the West as well. But really, a very large number of Jews live in places that I would say are more like Maine, places with smaller Jewish populations that are a little bit more diffuse and spread out. And I imagine that in many of these small communities, and this is what we're finding when we work with them, that they experience many of the things we experience here in Maine. There's a do-it-yourself culture with a potential for burnout because we have so many amazing volunteers, but there are only so many people in our communities. So we really tap into the same people over and over. An ability to be flexible. Denomination matters a lot less here than it matters, I think, in larger communities, because often there's only one choice and you're going to go to the synagogue that happens to be closest to you and are not going to be as tied to if that synagogue is affiliated or not. And again, a different class and a socioeconomic status that is different for members of the community and a little bit more poverty. And again, please feel free to put questions in the chat as you have them. I really want this to be a conversation as we go on. So I'd like to talk a little bit about the Center for Small Town Jewish Life at Colby College and what we do. We work with communities in Maine, at Colby in Maine and beyond, to build a vibrant, robust Jewish life. We believe that we're stronger when we work together as a Jewish community and really believe in cooperation and not competition. And we work locally in our state to create programs that foster these type of vibrant Jewish communities that we want to see. We're very focused on access for everyone, regardless of their economic status, very deep and real Jewish learning, and building intergenerational community. And nationally, we've started working in the last few years with leaders of smaller, more remote Jewish communities to help them do the same, to figure out what is the way that they can build the strongest Jewish community where they are, whether that's in Knoxville, Tennessee, or in Chico, California. So I want to talk a little bit about the pictures as a way to get into what I think is so special about what the center does. And the first picture I have right here is of our Mensch Madness Dreidel tournament. Every Hanukkah, we have a Mensch Madness Dreidel tournament with different brackets. And this is the child in the hat right here is anxiously watching these other two people because he is going to get to be in a playoff for the final with whoever wins. And what I love about this is it's rooted in a tradition that our community developed and engaging people of all sorts of different ages around what we do. We're really focused, as I said, on being accessible, making sure that there aren't financial barriers, that there aren't learning barriers, that everyone is welcome in the community, regardless of their background, and to make sure that we are really doing high quality learning, as I said. One of the things about being here in Maine that's different than being in Washington, D.C. is we just don't have as many people that were readily accessible to us who are able to bring that sort of Jewish wisdom to our communities. And so we lean a lot on our rabbis. We have a local community of some professors, and we bring people in from outside who can help share with folks that and deepen their Jewish tradition. So I want to go through those things a little bit more to share with them, and then I want to talk about our national programming a little bit. So one of the things that's really important in what we do at the center and what we do in the Jewish community in Maine is that we're deeply rooted in place. We really think about where we are and explore that. So these are some children from my Hebrew school. We back up our synagogue onto land trust land. It's protected land. And so when the weather is nice, we spend at least an hour every Sunday morning outside hiking and learning in the woods. And really being connected to the natural world. All of the synagogues in Maine have hiking Shabbats, have a Shabbat on the lake, are really taking advantage of where we are, because we know that Judaism in Maine looks different than Judaism in California, in Hawaii, in Texas, and we want to really dig into where we live. Another thing that I have found in moving here is the reverence that and respect that people have for history and tradition and the founders. And if you see in the background, there's a girl wearing a white shirt. She just had her bat mitzvah about a year ago. And as her bat mitzvah project, she interviewed some of the people who had been in our community for quite a while and created a booklet telling their stories to the rest of the congregation. And I think that's just one example of how we really try to teach everyone what the history of the Jewish community in Maine is and who our founders are, and grounded always in the values of Torah and community and helping one another. The second thing that's so important to the work we do here in Maine and at the center is fostering engagement. And I brought this picture because it's an intergenerational learning. This is a Colby College student in the middle, one of our young people, and then two scholars that came up for the Maine Conference for Jewish Life who talked about challah baking with us. And the four of them made all of the challah for our Shabbaton together. So this is really an encapsulation of the fact that I think we were just interviewing some apprentices, and one of them said that the Jewish community seems to be more and more siloed. There's a program for youth and a program for teens and a program for young adults and a program for newly retired. And we don't do that in Maine because we just don't have enough people. And so what we do instead is we intentionally try to build an intergenerational community, making sure that our youth and our college students and our elders are able to all talk to one another, to get to know one another, and to learn from one another. And we have to be able to build that type of engagement, again, because we're a small community. And when we try to segment ourselves, we know that it doesn't work as well. We, as I said, really work on being truly accessible, making sure that our programs are affordable. And I'll talk about this picture. This is Funtensive, our Jewish summer camp that we run for kids from across Central Maine, that we're culturally sensitive, that we're thinking about the wide variety of ways that people come into Judaism. We have an extremely large number of people who are Jews by choice. As I said, we have an extremely large number of people who are not Jewish but are part of Jewish families. And it's really important to us that we're able to include everyone in what we do and that we're welcoming to everyone. And that is really a core value of what makes our community strong and what makes our community grow. And finally, as I said, we really are learning is at the heart of everything that we do. We run a conference every year, a statewide conference called the Maine Conference for Jewish Life. And you'll see some pictures from that right there, including when we had to do our conference on Zoom. But people involved in making talit in children's programming and learning about the Bukharian Jewish community, making sure, like I said, I think sometimes there's a feeling that people outside of major Jewish population centers aren't interested in high quality learning, or that's not something they want. And we found the opposite. We found that folks here in Maine are really interested in digging deep with some of the best scholars of our generation, and we are able to bring those folks up here, musical artists like Nefesh Mountain and Batya Levine and Miles and Lapidus. In a few months, we have Joey Soloway, the writer of Transparent, coming. We've had Ruth Calderon teach at our conference. And so we really try to give folks access to those scholars. And we also bring up rabbinical students, apprentices who work with our communities so that they can provide more learning for all of us. I want to briefly talk about and highlight 3 programs that we do at the center as a way of talking about these things that we value: the rootedness, engagement, accessibility, and learning. And the first is what we call the Tzedakah Zakat Fellowship. This is a group of students at Colby College, Jewish and Muslim students, who work together to support new Mainers. Perhaps surprisingly to some of you, we actually have a fairly sizable refugee population here in central Maine, some immigrants from Iraq and Syria, and most recently, we are having folks come from Central Africa, from Central America, from all over the place. And so this group that we work at with our Colby College students, they learn about and visit with these new Mainers who are in our community. And then they run a fundraiser to help raise money to meet the needs of immigrants. And they also, we just started this year, a Yad B'Yad program where, because we have an increasing population in Waterville, where Colby is, where our college students are working with young people from immigrant families and mentoring them. So it's very based in the place and what we do. We're engaging our students with one another across lines of difference and also with people in our community. And this is a picture of a Shabbat that we hosted at my synagogue. And we had both a Muslim and Jewish student give a text teaching in Devar Torah based out of their tradition. So they're also having the ability to learn from and with one another. So that's an example of how we do this at Colby College. When I talk a little bit about how we do this in the community, we run, as I said, a Hebrew-focused summer camp for $5 a day. Now, some of you are thinking, if you come from big cities, that that does not seem like a lot of money, and that is true. And the reason we priced it at $5 a day, and it has not gone up since we started this camp, is that we want everybody to be able to pay the full cost. We run some of our programs with an opportunity for people to ask for scholarships. And we also recognize that there's something that's difficult about people asking for scholarships and not having to say to someone, I don't have enough money. And so we run this for $5 a day so that every family can pay the full cost of this program. And this is rooted in a very strong summer camp culture we have in Maine. My guess is that some of you either went to camp in Maine or know people that went to camp in Maine. It is a very big part of Maine life. And we bring together kids from congregations all over central Maine. Again, giving them the chance to get to know other Jewish kids, to get to know other Jewish adults, and to get to know one another. And we have a lot of fun together. And as I said, it's all based on Hebrew. We do a lot of Hebrew with the kids, Hebrew words of the day. You can see on the poster board in the back, those are all their Hebrew vocabulary words for the day. So that's a program that we do for our community, again, that's based on our values. And the last thing I want to talk about is how we work with communities outside of Maine. And that is through our Macon program, developing leadership in small, rural, and remote communities. We work with congregations and their leaders, and sometimes communities and their leaders. And it's really designed as a program for people who are new to the rabbinate or the cantorate or leadership in general. It's a way to support our emerging professionals if they want to choose to establish themselves in small towns, and to also help support their congregations. Because we know that there can be something that's difficult about being a small town rabbi, and we want to help make those as fruitful as possible. Um, so we engage with both the lay leaders and the professional, as I said. We are funded by some wonderful grants to do this work with these communities and really focused on learning and working with these professionals in their communities. We provide 3 years of training for people who are new to their jobs. They get to meet not only as a cohort, but also with a mentor for that entire time. We provide programming for lay leaders as well as workshops that are open to their whole community. And so through this, we're not trying to recreate the Center for Small Town Jewish Life in these other places, but we're trying to help them find and understand how can they be vibrant communities that are meeting the needs of the people where they are and where they are serving. And we feel like we've found out some things and discovered some things about how to make small town life a little bit more vibrant, and we want to share that with the broader Jewish community and help folks really understand how to do that in their communities. So I think we have quite a bit of time for questions, I'm guessing. I would love to hear what you want to know about the work of the Center for Small Town Jewish Life or Judaism in Small Communities, or just what makes us tick here in Central Maine, and would love to hear your thoughts and questions. Thank you all so much.
Okay, let me get started. And we've already had a number of questions. But first, how come Colby College became involved with small town Jewish life? How did the center begin?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and that really goes back to Rabbi Rachel Isaacs, who is the rabbi of Beth Israel congregation in Waterville, and came to that job right out of rabbinical school at JTS, and also works as part of her work at Colby College itself as a teacher. And when she came here, um, she was tasked with working with both the Hillel and teaching at the college and her congregation. And she pretty quickly discovered that instead of doing a Purim party for the Hillel and a Purim party for the congregation, it was going to be much better if she actually helped to integrate the college students with the congregation itself. That the students would learn and benefit from having that time with community members, and that the community, which was much smaller when she arrived, really needed the energy and excitement of those students to help them in some cases make a minyan, but also just to be a vital part of the community. And so it really started as that partnership between Beth Israel congregation and Colby College Hillel. And then she, working with Rabbi David Friedenreich, who is a tenured faculty member at Colby and head of the Jewish Studies Department, started to think about what would this look like if we could do this on a broader scale. What would it look like if we could start working with some other congregations? What would it look like if we could bring people together more to benefit from one another? And so one of the first things that they did, in addition to Funtensive, which they ran for themselves the first year, and then I said, hey, can I do that with my congregation too? And so our two congregations ran it. And then we thought, you know what? Maybe we should invite some other kids so that they can come. One of the other things that they did at first is the Maine Conference for Jewish Life, which is it will be our 11th year this year, as an idea to bring Jews from all over the state together, originally on Shavuot and now over a weekend for learning. So that's how it began, and it's housed at Colby College because that is really where Rabbi Isaacs and Rabbi Friedenreich are, and we really are based in the academic tradition and rigor of the college. Everything that we do is based within that academic institution. We have an interesting kind of spot within the college, right? They are our umbrella organization, and our staff is employed by them, and it's been a really beautiful partnership. And for Colby, I think there's a real interest in both supporting Jewish life on campus, and Colby College is also very interested in thinking about how it can work with and benefit the Waterville and broader Maine community. And this is a way to both enhance life on campus, not only for Jewish students, but for non-Jewish students as well. Many of our Muslim, there's a Muslim professor who advises the Muslim students quite well, but many of our Muslim students actually go to our center faculty and staff who they know from the programs we do together to support them. And so it's a way for us to really support life on campus, and Colby to really be involved in life outside of the community as well.
Okay, so many things to ask. Okay, in terms of some of the questions, specifically to your congregation, Bethel, how do you involve from people? There's a whole spectrum of observance, as you know so well, and you want to be accommodating. How then do you embrace these different approaches to Judaism and Jewish traditions and rituals?
Great. So I think from is a little bit of a squishy category, right? And as I said, I think that denomination doesn't matter as much here. If you go to my services and Rabbi Isaac's services, I am a Reform rabbi, she's a conservative rabbi. You're not going to see that many differences between the two of them, because our congregations are really there to kind of serve all the folks. That being said, if you are not going to drive on Shabbat, Central Maine is a very hard place for you to live. So most people who are Orthodox and that is their religious affiliation are living in Portland, and a few in Bangor, as well, which has a much larger Jewish population. Rabbi Isaac's has a kosher synagogue. We have a dairy synagogue, so we also have a kosher synagogue. That was important to our founders. Again, even though we're affiliated as a Reform congregation, it was a value that everyone be able to eat in our building. If you want a totally traditional, you're going to get traditional davening with Rabbi Isaac's, like you really are. So I think we do the best we can to accommodate folks everywhere on the spectrum.
And this is something I'm sure that you talk about with the rabbis and other religious leaders who come to the center in terms of their own communities, when they draw on people from different backgrounds and different experiences growing up Jewishly. And if you want to share anything about what you're hearing from them across the broad United States.
About working with people from different Jewish backgrounds? Yeah. Yeah. Look, I think one of the beauties of small town Jewish life, whether you're here or in these other places, is that you are forced to be able to be open to a more diverse group of people, because if people want Jewish life and you're the only game in town, you're gonna have to figure out how to make that work. So I think, and I'll say, I think diversity also includes, like, I have some people who are very committed to the Union prayer book that they grew up with and feel very uncomfortable with the amount of Hebrew that has made their way into the Reform services, right? So I don't want to say that everything within denominations is also right, that we have no feelings about how denominations have changed. I think in addition to that, we're just seeing a Jewish community that increasingly has a number of people who didn't grow up Jewish within it. There are more and more people that are choosing Judaism. That's a national trend that I hear from other rabbis that we are seeing here as well. I am going to have 6 or 7 people in my 110 household congregation convert, right, this year. So that is a huge percentage, right? 5% of our congregation will be people who have become Jewish this year. And only one of those people is currently partnered with somebody who is Jewish. So most of them are people who are coming to Judaism on their own without a family member.
And wait, I must interrupt you.
Please.
Any generalizations as to what has drawn them to Judaism?
Yeah. So I think that is a great question. I think that COVID had a lot to do with it. I think there are some people who have been thinking about becoming Jewish or interested in Judaism and were interested for a long time. And I think COVID clarified that for a lot of people. And I think that when the pandemic, it is not totally over, I understand that. But when we started going back to being in person, a lot of people acted on that. And I think that there's a real searching out there a real searching for meaning. And I think that people find within Judaism a religion that is both rooted in tradition and also available to be responsive to the moods of the moments and so I find a lot of people who, like I said, are really drawn to the tradition, the history, the Torah, and also appreciate the fact that Judaism, right, that progressive Judaism believes in equality for women and rights for LGBTQ people and all of those things that feel important to people within a community.
Okay, you have a wonderful background involved in social justice in different contexts. And we have a very interesting and probing question from Barbara Kraft. I don't know where you're from, Barbara, but you are asking about the ways you found to engage people on social justice issues, including issues that may not seem to directly affect them, such as immigration, such as racial equity, and the like.
Great. So that's a really great question. I think this is another beauty of being in a small town. I think it's actually easier in some ways. So I want to talk about our work with the immigrant population. 2 members from our synagogue, along with 2 members of the Iraqi community, founded this group called the Capital Area New Mainers Project in 2016, which works with immigrants and refugees in our area, both providing support for them, because people know the government only provides 90 days of support for new immigrants and refugees, and also educating the broader community about who these new people are and the benefit that they bring to our community. So this is when I was in DC, which I'll reference because first of all, there are lots of immigrant organizations helping immigrants. It would be hard to have the audacity to start this in a big town. But second of all, this is a small community. So the schools in Augusta went from having no immigrants to having 25% of their population in the school that most of these kids went to, the elementary school, being from immigrant households. That is very hard to ignore in a small community in a way that I think it's actually a little bit easier to not feel if you're in a big community, right? If you're living in a suburb somewhere, you're not going to notice necessarily the trends that bring new immigrants into your community if they're not living right there. So this was something, and we actually did a really interesting, one of the first organizing campaigns we did at the synagogue was working with these Muslim immigrants. And we additionally have a Muslim population that's much more established, people mainly from India and Pakistan, also a Hindu population, and Jewish families to work on putting religious holidays on the calendars of public schools and not scheduling important school-wide events on those holidays. And there was a really interesting commonality between the Jewish parents who forever had been upset that, for instance, the apple picking trip was on Rosh Hashanah. Ironic, I know, but the kindergarten apple picking trip had happened to 2 of my children. And these Muslim students who were coming in, and the last day of school was on Eid, right? And they all missed the last day of school. And so we found this really interesting commonality because we were kind of so close to one another to figure out how we could work with our school boards. And I'll just add as an interesting note that one of the families that this group that camp works with is a family from Afghanistan. They are renting a house literally across the street from the synagogue, and their family mentor team is a team from my synagogue. So when I drive into my synagogue and see a car in the parking lot, I know that they're there to visit Haji and his family. They're definitely not there to see me. And I know that they're hanging out with them and working with them. So that's my answer. I think that because we're closer together, we really see and feel that more strongly than my experience was being in a big city where it felt a little bit easier to ignore.
Okay, we have a question, and I'm sure more people are thinking about this as we think about developments in Israel. But stepping back from the immediate events of the past couple of months post October 7th, how has Israel played into the world of small town Jewry in Maine and also in the rest of the country?
Yeah, I don't know that I can speak to the rest of the country as well on this particular topic, but I will say that we have a number of Israelis who are living within our Maine community, we've all obviously been deeply impacted by what happened on October 7th, and they in particular have been incredibly impacted by that. So Rabbi Isaacs and I have been working with that group to see how we can support them and the needs that they have. And some of them are members of our congregations and some of them are not. But I think one of the great things about being in a small town is, again, that we all just kind of look out for the Jews who are there, right? We don't have a lot of, well, they're your congregant, they're my congregant. We in many ways see ourselves as responsible for the whole Maine Jewish community. So I think that's been something, and because there's a small Israeli population here, different than it would be in a big city, I think that they feel particularly isolated in a way that they might not if we had more Israelis. I also think that like in many places, we have deep ties with the interfaith community, with the community outside of the Jewish community, and that's something that we've really worked to continue to strengthen and to think about in this new world that has changed a lot since October 7th. So those are my beginning thoughts. If you have more specific questions, feel free to.
Barbara Kraft asked about anti-Semitism. And certainly there's increased focus on that and articles appearing in all kinds of places, pondering, musing, pontificating.
Yeah, I think Maine is certainly not immune to that. Either we've, certainly had incidents of anti-Semitic graffiti, and we had some neo-Nazis who protested outside of the governor's house over the summer. And we are in a heightened security situation, as everyone is. And I think it's been something that we've been really clear about trying to work with our statewide elected officials on. We have had a chance to talk to the governor about our concerns, to talk to some of our federal representatives about our concerns, and really think about how can Maine support the Jewish community in terms of grants, in terms of raising visibility and awareness, in terms of teaching and education that we do around not just the Holocaust, but Jewish life in general and what Jewish life is. And I think it also comes down to just continuing to build those local relationships like it does in so many places. So it's certainly something that we're concerned about. It's certainly something that our kids are feeling more. It's certainly something that we're thinking about in heightened time of tension on many college campuses. And it's impacted us just like it's impacted a lot of other people.
Has Aliyah been something that people have pondered and actually acted upon?
We have not had too many Maine Jews that I know of that have made Aliyah.
All right. So in terms of the multi-generational or intergenerational, I was just talking with someone at lunch about the siloing that I am seeing in the Washington area in terms of these programs are 39 and that sort of thing. How are you engaging people across an age span of possibly 70 years?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question. So I think that there's a few answers here. And I think one has to do with, we have the University of Maine at Augusta, so it is a college, but we are not in a college town with a lot of Jewish students. But my colleagues that are in particularly where Bates, Bowdoin, and Colby are, one of the things they do is they just bring the college students and the congregants together. And so Rabbi Isaacs is teaching a series on anti-Semitism, actually, that has an equal representation of Colby College students and her community. They also do a home hospitality Shabbat where they invite the college students to come into the community members' houses. And she does a lot of programming, and in our other towns as well, that kind of specifically brings those groups together. And then the other thing that I would say is, you know, this is like the great thing about not having so many people is that sometimes we're just, if we want to do something, we just all have to do it together. So I think a lot of things that would be kind of would normally have adults, we have our teens come to, right? Some of our teens want to come to our learning programs that we do. They're all bugging me to come to our adult program party because they all want to come hang out with the adults. We have a fiber arts group that meets monthly that has a wide range of folks who come from a 16-year-old to people in their 70s, and they spend 2 hours together every month working on their projects and chatting. And that is, I think, one of the most intergenerational spaces that we have at the congregation. And I think it's just about opening it up to people. And I think not only are Jewish communities increasingly siloed in terms of age, but I think we all are, right? I mean, I don't know about you, but I mostly spend time with people who have kids who are in middle and high school. That is where I spend most of my time, like outside of work, right? Those are the people I hang out with because those are the people that I know. And I think that there's a real hunger. I don't know if you all feel it, but I think that there's a real hunger to just broaden that age span a little bit. Particularly so many people who are more educated, which tends to be where the Jewish community is, don't live close to their families. My parents still live in California. My husband's parents were in DC, but they're both deceased. So my kids don't get to see their grandparents in person that often. So it's really important to me that they feel like they have an extended community at the synagogue. And I think it's one of the few intergenerational spaces that we truly have. And I think people really understand and appreciate that.
Yeah, I think size, as you point out, is important here. Some more pragmatic questions.
Yeah.
Where do you get your teachers for the Hebrew programs?
Yeah. So that's a great question. My colleagues who have college students use those college students, which is amazing. Um, Finding teachers has been a difficult thing. I have 3 congregants who teach with me now, one of whom amazingly is a Reconstructionist rabbi who is not working in a congregation. And they very graciously come on Sunday mornings to teach, which is incredible. And in terms of, we have a very small Hebrew school. We have about 17 kids in our Hebrew school, K through 7. And all of the kids, when they're learning Hebrew, have this is another intergenerational thing, have individual tutors. And I put a call out to the congregation and say, who knows their Aleph Bet and their prayers and is willing to tutor a child? And we have tutors for 7 kids now, I think. Some of whom are teenagers. I have a few teenagers who are tutoring, but some of whom are adults, and they meet on Zoom every week with that student for 20 to 30 minutes for several years. And so they build really beautiful relationships with one another. And I'm always willing to help the adult out. You don't have to know everything, but it's everybody just kind of has to chip in because it's really not going to work if we don't do that, because that has been something that's been really difficult, is finding people who can teach.
And of course, the winters are not exactly tropical. So often, or maybe not often, you would have the services on Shabbat via Zoom.
No,
Okay.
I would say we have to cancel because of weather maybe once a year.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
You
we're
people,
pretty hardy.
yeah, you're used to cold. I was just in Minnesota and I had 1 6-degree morning, but otherwise it was actually pretty warm. All right, another pragmatic question, which you can answer as you wish. In terms of economics, you mentioned the importance of making everyone feel equal and comfortable, but then you have to support the synagogue, salaries, maintenance, and all that. And you get some philanthropic contributions. So this is the way you can kind of pool income streams, I guess, to support what you need to do.
Yeah, so there's center funding that supports our statewide programming and our staff, and then there's kind of individual congregational funding that we use to fund our congregations. And I'll say my congregation, about 6 or 7 years ago, went to a truma system, a free will offering based system. So we did have dues, like many of your synagogues probably have. Um, it wasn't actually based on income, it was a flat fee, but I know a lot of synagogues have, if you make X amount, give so much. And we really felt for us like it was hard for people to ask, even though we didn't ask for anything. Like, you say you can pay X amount, we'll give it to you. We felt like it was really, in some ways, humiliating, and made people feel like they were less members of our community if they had to ask for an abatement. And so after a lot of talking within our congregation, we met in small groups, we talked about this. We said, we're going to tell people to pay what they'd like. You can pay any amount of money to be a member. We tell them how much it costs per household to run the synagogue. We say, it costs us X amount per household to run the synagogue. Please give whatever you can. And something really beautiful happened, which is that the amount of money we got went up. And the reason for that is, and this doesn't work in every community, but it works in our community, because people know that there's a financial need, and they know that there are members of our community who cannot pay what it costs us per household. And when we were very honest about, if you have a little bit extra, please pay more to help support people who don't have as much, people were incredibly generous. And here's the other thing that happened. We got a lot more young people to join our synagogue because dues were not a barrier to them anymore. And in fact, I got a note from a family who joined recently. I will not share anything else about them except to say that they are a young family who sent a note with their dues that said, we were able to pay a little bit more than last year, and we hope next year we can pay a little bit more. Thank you so much for making this synagogue accessible to anyone, regardless of the amount of money that they have. And it really makes, the money is great, right? It's great that we are doing better financially, but the thing that's more important is that everybody feels welcome and feels like a full member of the community. Nobody feels less than because they're sending us $18 a year. And that is actually, I think, the most beautiful thing about the system that we have, is that we're sustaining our community and people are feeling really good about what they're able to give financially.
Yeah, along those lines, somebody asks about the support of the institutionalized Jewish community. That's Lisa Lang, and how Hillel might be helping, or Hebrew Union College, or the Jewish Theological Seminary for small towns, yours and the center, and individual small towns in their communal life.
Yeah, so the seminaries do not give any money to small towns. Rabbi Isaacs came up on a fellowship that was funded so that she could come up to kind of be an apprentice rabbi. But we know one of the interesting things about Central Maine, we have a JCA, a Jewish Community Alliance, part of Federation in Portland, but they don't cover Central Maine. So we, in this kind of area, don't have access to that financial support. So we really are, I mean, the center raises money from foundations and from alumni for the work that we do at Colby and beyond, but not from seminaries. Yeah.
Okay. David asks about programs to facilitate dating within the Jewish religion.
We do not have any of those programs.
Yeah, I kind of thought you would give that as a response. It's so exciting to hear this, and I'm sure. Okay, what about Jewish communities in other countries? Do they come to you? They've heard about the center. I've spent some time in Argentina and in Chile, which have Jewish communities, and some of them would be in small towns. Do you have any interchange with them?
Yeah, that's a great question. Actually, Cantor, who's in Portland, Cantor Shayla Nessus, who just joined our staff, is from Argentina.
Oh.
A little bit. We don't have a ton, to be totally honest. I think some of the things that we do and are doing are of interest to folks. So for instance, we have a Shlichei Tzibur program, we train people to be prayer leaders. One of the difficulties of having only one clergy person is that when that person goes on vacation or is sick, or there are 6 nights of a Shiva Minyan, you need some more lay leaders. So we're working, we train leaders in Maine, also in Vermont, and we have some folks from Massachusetts, not Boston, but outlying areas that we're training to help be prayer leaders. So yeah.
Okay, again, people are interested in lots of things, including Jewish infrastructure. You
Yeah.
alluded to this, but maybe you could say more about a Jewish federation, either for the state as a whole or in large cities, or however it's structured.
Yeah, so we have a federation of Greater Portland that covers the Greater Portland area. And they work with that community. Portland and a little bit north, if you know Maine, to Brunswick or so, and south down to the New Hampshire border.
Would that cover the entire state, even though it's
No.
It wouldn't. Okay.
So it doesn't cover me, it doesn't cover Waterville, it doesn't cover anything north of us.
Okay, you mentioned that before. Let's nitty gritty from Carol. Do you have a building? What is it like? And how old is it?
Yeah. We do have a building. The congregation was founded in 1940. The building was built in the 1960s, late 1960s. And it is great. We actually have done a lot of expansion since I came, right? The congregation started. It was many places start like that. It was 10 or 15 families. They hired their first rabbi about 28 years ago. And when she came, the congregation was 40 households. So, substantially smaller than we are now. And since I've come, it was not because I came, something that was in the works with our lay leaders. We've totally renovated our building. We actually bought a house that's right next to our building that serves as our offices and Hebrew school classrooms. We're finishing work on an outdoor area. We just finished fundraising. We're going to start work on an outdoor area. So the building is old but very new now, because we did a lot of renovation to make it work. And it's one big, it's one big room of the sanctuary, and there's a social hall that we can partition off, and there's a kitchen and a few bathrooms. So it is big enough that we all fit in it. And it's actually beautiful. And yeah.
The Hebrew
It's
school, when it meets, will meet in one of those spaces.
Yeah, it meets we have a classroom and office building. So they will meet in there, and then we use the sanctuary building as well, but we use both of them.
Okay. Okay, well, this is very exciting, and you're getting young apprentice rabbis to come up from Hebrew Union College and maybe JTS for a Shabbat, for a holiday.
So we hire 3 apprentices every year. They work with myself or Rabbi Isaacs or Rabbi Vinacor. So they come from Hebrew College, HUC, JTS, and RRC, the Reconstructionist Rabbinical College. And they come up 5 visits a year, 5 weekends a year. And additionally, they come for our conference, our statewide conference, and our fall Shabbaton. So they come to 2 conferences. So they come up 8 times a year. And it's a mentorship program. One of the things that we feel that is difficult for people who are becoming rabbis is that there are not a lot of opportunities for close mentoring in the field. There's a lot of opportunity to go do your own thing at a community with no other rabbi. There's a lot of opportunity to work in a big synagogue where you're kind of plugged into a program that they want you to do, but there's not a lot of opportunity for really intensive mentoring. And that's what we work on with the students. So really helping them work on the skills that they need and introducing them to small town Jewish life. For many Jews go through their whole lives not having experienced a community outside of a big city. And it's really important to us that the future leaders of the Jewish people, no matter where they decide they want to serve, understand what this population is like, and what this place where so many Jews live is like. And so that's another important piece for us, is helping them to understand what it's like in a small town, as a Jewish person and as a Jewish professional.
And the network you're developing is really extraordinary for the future. What about kashrut? How do small town communities handle that in terms of access to kosher food?
Yeah, I mean the internet is a beautiful thing, right? You can order kosher meat. Um, and it will get shipped to you on dry ice. You just need an extra freezer, which most people in Maine have because there's a big culture of hunting here. So,
Ah,
so yeah, you just order it through the mail. Sometimes people will do trips down to Boston. We bring up a lot of our Passover food from Boston, but the internet is a beautiful thing.
oh, this is fascinating. Jerry, you always have questions, so let me turn over to you and see what you'd like to ask, and then we can go back to the chat and see about some other things that are emerging.
Oh, thank you. Before I ask any questions, let me just mention that we are trying to have our annual Latka Hamantash debate 2 weeks from tonight on March 20th. I'm saying we're trying because we're trying to have it as a in-person and hybrid, but we've never done that, so I'm not sure what's going to happen. We haven't advertised it yet. You watch your emails. As I said in the chat, at one point I lived in a small Jewish community in New Mexico, Las Cruces, New Mexico, where New Mexico State University was. And it's very interesting. When we first came there was no rabbi, and we had, like you had, about 40 or 50 families, no rabbi. At one point, and we used the old Union prayer book that you mentioned. Later on, the Gates of Prayer, which is the newer one. And at one point, we invited up the Orthodox rabbi who was the chaplain at Fort Bliss, which is about 45 miles away. He came up, stayed with the family so he can come on Shabbat. And he looked through the prayer book and found pieces here and pieces there and made a kind of Orthodox type service out of all the pieces. It's very interesting. I also come from a small town. I come from the Catskills, which is small town, but large Jewish population. You're in a small town with a small Jewish population. And I've noticed that in the small Jewish population, people have to get engaged. Otherwise, they can't do anything. So it's a very different life than, in DC. So I don't have any questions, but I have a lot of experience in small town Jewish life.
Yeah.
Okay, let me go back. I'm intrigued. I organize conferences myself. And I'm wondering if you'd say a bit about your conferences, which are important aspects of your learning and the growth of the religious leadership and the lay leadership too.
Yeah. So we host 2 statewide gatherings. We host our main conference for Jewish life in June. It's a Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And then we host our fall Shabbaton sometime in the fall, which is a Friday and Saturday. And our fall Shabbaton is music-based. We bring a musical artist in to lead us throughout the weekend, which includes in a very main way on a Saturday afternoon, a Shabbat hike. It is not usually warm, but it's often beautiful. And then our conference is Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and pulls in people from all over the state. And I think one of the things that's been really lovely about that, so I think that there's a few things. One is, again, we get to bring in new people and new teachers, and our apprentices all teach, and that's a really wonderful opportunity just for learning and community. And again, like I could not bring Nefesh Mountain into my congregation as the rabbi of Augusta, Maine. So it's a privilege to get to be with those people that we couldn't necessarily afford to bring on our own, and that we just wouldn't have the audience for on our own, right? There's something about having that critical mass. And the second thing that it does is it really helps to build our statewide community. So we have kids from our Funtensive and teens from our teen program who really look forward to getting together and seeing each other. And then the other thing that happens is we just get to know people from other synagogues. So my example of this is they had a No Place for Hate rally in Augusta after the neo-Nazi stuff. And we had congregants from 2 other Jewish communities come and congregants from my community, and they all knew each other. like they didn't know each other super well, but they're like, oh, I know, of course I know who you are, right? And that wouldn't have happened without these statewide programs that we do. So we really have more of a sense of the kind of whole community, which I think is um also a really special thing.
Do you record these conferences?
They're in person. We Zoom our Friday night. For our conference and the Shabbaton, we have a Zoom option, but the rest of it is in person.
Yeah. No, because again, I think people would be fascinated with some of the issues that come up.
Yeah.
Oh, the other end of the life cycle, not necessarily the end of the life cycle, people die at all ages. What about Jewish cemeteries?
Yeah, so we don't have a Jewish cemetery in Augusta. There are Jewish cemeteries. There's Jewish cemeteries in Portland, and then on the coast, um, and then in the west near Lewiston, Auburn, and then also up in Bangor. So those are the Jewish cemetery options. You have to drive a little while. The Jewish community in Augusta just never ended up establishing a Jewish cemetery, which I don't know the history behind that. I should. Um, but yeah.
Okay. Well, look, we're coming close to the time we allotted, and you've been very gracious in answering the whole range of questions. Are there any final thoughts you want to leave us with in terms of the work that you do in your own synagogue, with the center, with small town Jewish life as you see it through various lenses? There are so many layers you could respond to.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for asking. And thank you for taking the time out of your evening to be with us, everyone. I really appreciate it. Um, I think I love many things about big city Judaism, and I also love many things about small town Judaism. And I think that we both have something to teach each other. And I think the thing that I've learned being here that I think is something that the entire Jewish community could benefit from is, first of all, just the importance of working together. I think we're forced to do that when we're smaller, but we really believe we want people to find the best synagogue and best fit for them, even if it's not my synagogue, right? I want a person to find a place where they're going to engage Jewishly. And I will tell people sometimes who live closer to another synagogue, because people drive long distances, maybe you should check out, we would love to have you, but check out the synagogue that's 10 minutes from your house instead of 45 minutes from your house and see if that's a better fit for you because you're probably going to go there more often. So I think that experience of finding that when we build Jewish community stronger in our state, each of our individual synagogues is also going to be stronger. And we really need to work together to build the entire Jewish community. And then I think the other few things that are really important about here in Maine is, as I said, the intergenerational community that we build. I think it's a gift that we can give people, finding a space for us to talk to one another across those generational lines. And and then just economic access for everyone. I think too often we have financial barriers to being Jewish, and that's really a loss for our community when people are not able to join or don't feel like they can join because of their economic status. And I think that's something that we really need to think about is how we can bring everyone into our community, regardless of how much money they make.
I
So
have to ask you,
Mindy, can if someone has a question, but he can't write it into the chat, Zoom, Zoom user, I don't know who you are, what your question is, but can you put your picture on and you can ask a question if you want.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I'm sorry I'm so technically ignorant. I attended your June Maine small town event with my daughter who is raising her kids in Cape Elizabeth.
yeah.
And I thought it was fabulous, and learned a lot from what you're saying tonight. Thank you. My question is really how much, but you touched on a little bit, the Portland community and communities interact with your community. I sense not so much, but I'm not living up in Cape Elizabeth where she is.
Yeah, that's a great question. Thanks. I think, we've had a very strong partnership with the JCA, the Jewish Community Alliance, over the past few years. They help sponsor our programs. They sent their staff to our conference last year, which was really wonderful. And so that relationship is growing. And then I think the
Mhm.
congregations do a lot of things together. We just taught a statewide Intro to Judaism class. Which was great. People teaching from all different places, and one of the rabbis in Portland was one of our teachers for that, in addition to rabbis other places. And we're doing Central Maine Yom HaAtzmaut, Yom HaZikaron ceremony, and I just got an email from one of the rabbis that they're going to come up. So there's a weird thing in Maine that people only drive south. They don't really like to drive north. That's like everyone has their things, and that's one of the things in Maine. So I think we're a little hampered by geography. But we partner when it makes sense for us to partner, and that's been really, really wonderful.
Well, thank you. I mean, the thing is that you're getting so many new Mainers, including my daughter coming from
Yeah.
Washington, D.C., that she was really explored, and we were both intrigued by your programs. So maybe the Mainers are changing, and it's not just the immigrants from other countries.
No, that's very true. We've had a number of people post-COVID who have moved to our communities from bigger cities, and that's been a really wonderful infusion as well. So welcome to your daughter, and I hope she comes up to our next conference as
Keep
well.
up the great work. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you.
Wow, great. I was wondering, do you try to do Friday night dinners or after services a Shabbat meal fairly regularly?
We do Saturday lunches every Saturday that we have something. At our synagogue, we do Friday dinners occasionally. And I think the other synagogues do meals kind of occasionally, depending. So yeah, that is a part of our culture.
Okay, that's a nice way to conclude on Jewish cuisine. That's always a tasty subject. Well, I can't thank you enough, and I will have to find a way to get up to Maine to see for myself. And I wouldn't doubt that others on this evening program will find a way to come and see for themselves as well.
You are all always welcome. Please come up and visit us. We'd love to have you anytime. And our conference in June is incredible. So if you are interested in coming up for our June conference, it's really wonderful. And we'd encourage all of you to come up and experience Jewish life in Maine.
There's small hotels we could stay at, I guess, right?
There are beautiful hotels you can stay at. You can also rent a place on the lake.
Ooh, all right, inducement. Hey, Jerry.
How far are you from Winterport? And someone from our congregation just moved up there last year.
I don't know how far I am from Winterport. I'm sorry.
People are moving to Maine, no question about
They are.
that.
They are.
All right, maybe we'll join them.
Okay.
Okay, well, Laila Tov and Lehitraot.
Thank you. Thank you all. It was great to be with you.
Thank you, Rabbi Asch. And thank people who are coming in, all the great questions. And, watch your email for where the recording is, and also watch your email for if and when we're going to have the debate, the annual debate, 2 weeks from today on March 20th. I hope we get it made, but I'm not sure about it this year. Okay, thank you very much.
Right.
Thank you very much, Rabbi. Thank you
It's
very
great to
much,
be with you.
everybody.
Thank you.
I really enjoyed it. Thank you. Laila Tov.
Laila Tov.
Laila Tov, everyone.
Okay.
Thank you. Good night.
Night.